Okay, welcome everybody. This is a special little segment on mini splits and the desire to bring in air conditioning to your unit, specifically in the condominium setting, where we've got boards and communities that are concerned about their exterior walls being their building envelope. And so, as building envelope consultants, we're like, okay, let's make sure it's watertight when you're drilling holes through the building or attaching these things to the building, and also kind of setting a precedence with the rest of your units of, hey, unit 301 got to add air conditioning, I get to add air conditioning, right? And so we get into this, okay, they did a good job on their heat pump or their exterior unit install, but the next guy did a really bad job. Now I got all these condensate lines. And so what I'm going to take you through is just a very simple, some Google images, and I'll show you that. Just Google images of heat pumps and AC, and talk to you about the differences between the two. Because we're getting a lot of calls now this summer. We're getting a lot of calls, people saying, hey, I want to add air conditioning. In the Pacific Northwest, a lot of homes don't have air conditioning already built in. So people are wanting to add it as it gets hot, and we understand that. So we have a couple of different packages, if you will. The first one is the cheapest, easiest thing. You're using a portable air conditioning unit that you plug into the wall, but you have that duct and it needs to go outside. So instead of having the window slot thing that we've all seen with your duct work going through it, we give you a port through the wall. So that's very similar to a bath fan, dryer duct on the outside. It has a vent and a duct and a louver and a through wall. And on the inside, it just has a cap or a cover. So for the couple of months you want to use your portable AC unit, take that cover off, plug in your hose, and you're good to go. And so we can make that through wall penetration watertight. The other approach is the more bolt-on, buy a new system, like a mini split system. And now we're dealing with an interior unit, an exterior unit, 220 electrical, some condensate lines, or those things that run on the outside, and how we make it look pretty, how we make it watertight, and how we give you some kind of design guidelines for the president or precedents of the community. So I'm going to share screen and take you to just a Google. We're going to Google things together here. So moving there, and I'm just going to go Google mini split up here. And so I'm going to start with this image. And this is the old school forced air, what we used to call, just central air. And so you've got an exterior, I call them heat pumps, they're condensers, things like that. So you got an exterior unit. You do have some condensate lines over here. You've got some electrical, but it ultimately comes to your furnace. You might have another unit right here, or this may be part of your furnace system. But the idea is that any cold air comes into a trunk line that then attaches to the rest of your ductwork. And so that outside unit has to be big enough to cool the entire house. And so it just plumbs into your existing heat duct system. So this is a central air idea where I've already got a furnace, I've already got ductwork, and I'm just kind of putting a trunk line on it so that I get cold air out of every vent in the existing home or office or whatever you have there. And so it's kind of similar, but you have this pad mount unit, you have some condenser lines, you have some control wires, things like that, but you have kind of this bigger heat pump. Now, let me take you over to this one, which is an image of a multi-head mini split system using one exterior mounted condenser. So the difference between the mini split and the forced air system, the mini split has these nice, attractive, you can see over here, these high wall mounted units, maybe one in the common area, one in the bedroom, but we'll get into that later. but they're mounted high because cold air falls down, right? So we want the AC to fall into the room and cool the room versus coming up from a floor duct, or ideally maybe we have some interior ceiling ducts that we can plumb in. So I'll show you some of those pictures later. But you have an interior, we'll call it mini split, interior head, and then an exterior unit, also known as the condenser, the heat pump. I'm sure I'll get some critique on that, but for purposes of this, we're talking interior and exterior unit. So in this example, we can see one pretty big exterior unit, and it's plumbed to 5 interior units. And you can see we've got exterior, some condensate lines, but then it goes inside. So I'm assuming these lines are buried in the wall, and that's something else to consider. So new construction, we can put all the stuff in the wall, you don't see anything. Existing construction, where we're adding it to it, we're either cutting into the wall or you're bolting on this stuff to the outside of your building and even in the inside of your building, covering it with some kind of conduit. Yeah, and we'll get into clean installs and not clean installs. But so here's an example of a 5-head. Here's this photo over here is just a 1-head unit. And so here's what we see. Condo units will call and say, hey, I've just got a 1-bedroom. It's 600 square feet. I just want one interior unit in the main common area. I'll run that when it's hot outside, and that'll basically cool down the unit. If I want to get extra special, I'll put 1 head in the master bedroom, 1 head in the outside or in the common area. So now I've got a 2-head unit. Some people want AC in every single unit. So then you put in your 5 heads like this diagram. So things we got to think about on the exterior, we got to think, here's an example of this exterior unit sitting on a pad. So we've got exterior pad, concrete pad, ground sitting on a pad doing its thing. It's, another ground sitting on a concrete pad. What if I've got unit 301 that's elevated, 3rd story? They want to put it on their deck. Okay, now I'm going to have vibration noise. This thing is a big fan. It's runs and makes noise. And so that's going to reverberate through the entire building or an area of the building. And so, when you got a party wall, they have their deck and the other guy has his master bedroom. Well, I'm trying to sleep and I hear his vibrating exterior unit on his deck. So there's some things, insulating feet, rubber gaskets, anti-vibration things we're thinking about. The next thing I can scroll through and find it for you. Here's another pad. Here's another pad. Let's talk about that pad with the rack. So pad with a elevated rack. This is necessary for locations that have snow, constant snow on the ground year round, or in more sandy, arid, dry, dusty areas, kind of the wind blows and the dust is blowing across the ground, or the leaves and pine needles and things like that. Let me put it up on a rack to kind of keep it out of that fray so that I don't get so much sand and dust in there. So this is an example of a couple of sitting on a pad, but it's also sitting on some rubber footings here. But here's 2 exterior units, so we've got a bigger system in there. Let me find our. Here's an example of exterior. I can run my lines inside the wall into the thing. It's real clean. I don't see a bunch of outside stuff. And then the wall mount. The wall mount's the 3rd option. So I've got some steel brackets mounted to the wall. This thing sits up on the wall. Again, it keeps it off the ground, gets it out of the snow, out of the dirt. Or it's an elevated, 3rd, 5th floor unit, and we've got these things bolted to the wall. So again, we've got vibration, and now we start getting into some looks or aesthetics. So if I'm standing at the street, see this beautiful, 3-4 story building, and now I see these heat pumps or these exterior condenser units kind of mishmashed all over, they're not in a nice line, they're not sequential, a pattern, if you will, versus I'm going to put mine here, I'm going to put mine here, I'm going to put mine here. And so you start getting into, now it looks like real ticky-tack bolt-on after effects here. So anyway, I'm still on the Google thing. Let me just take you through some of these pieces now that I've set some of the groundwork for you. They're the head unit, nice little attractive units above a couch. The cool air is going to blow on me. Another thing we can add on while I'm thinking about it, some of these can have heat and cooling. Some are just cooling. And so it's important to understand what you have there. This is a one head unit. I've got the exterior unit, interior unit, the condensate lines that come with it. Here's an example of that diagram. And here's what we're talking about. It says 3-inch hole through wall, and just how we prepare that opening, make it watertight, tie it into the existing WRB, make it like any other penetration, like a bath fan, light fixture, put flashing above it, as opposed to do your best and caulk the rest or squirt spray foam around it. Don't worry, it won't leak. Yeah, okay. So here you can see exterior wall mount unit. It's a pretty small one, but still mounted to the wall. Mounted to the wall on the brick. Now we've got a bright, shiny conduit. We've got a big, long, pigtail to the 220 outlet. So it starts kind of getting busy. It's square conduit. We've seen some round conduit. Here's some other examples. You can see in this picture, we've got some pre-painted stuff that sticks on, looks a little cleaner. An example of exterior mounted unit, condensate lines going to kind of a little hood. Then we got some ugly electrical lines running down here. So how we can tighten these things up and make them cleaner is important for everybody's benefit. So here's the interior conduit. Maybe they came through low and went up the inside of the wall, wrapping it in some plastic stuff. So again, some things to think about. As I'm scrolling down. Okay. Icing over. So depending on the climate you're in, some people build some kind of box, some kind of shelter, but these things are sucking in air and blowing out air. And so we've seen some things that they try to build a box around it, and then they restrict the airflow and they burn out the unit. But developing some kind of hood to keep the ice or snow out from it. It depends on the condition and environment you're living in. Here's a pretty clean one on a pad, has some conduit, again, exterior electrical conduit, and then it looks like your condensate lines are run through low. The interior units look good. Avoid these 3 mistakes. Here's some YouTube videos. Just watch them, and you'll see what we're talking about. I'm gonna a couple more things. Here's an example of a ceiling mount unit that you could put into your ceiling. If you had attic space above, you could run your condensate lines up in the attic. You could, it's a little cleaner. Some things to think about for attic runs. We see some condensate lines or drain recirculating lines, whatever you want to call them. They will freeze up. And so if the attic isn't insulated, or if there's fresh air flow, they'll actually freeze up and your unit will stop working. So how do we heat tape those? How do we, make sure they're working correctly? So here's a big old, a double unit, probably for multiple zones, and another one. It's bolted onto a big panel. Okay, now we start. What's on the outside of my building, and does that look like just heck? And so those are some things as a board you want to be thinking about. Let me take, here's a nice clean install. This is some kind of panel, takes their condensate lines through. Now that these condensate lines have just pipe insulation, think like a pool floaty, and a UV will actually break down that pipe insulation. It'll get chunky and start looking crummy. So you want to wrap those. This starts looking kind of chunky. You got, again, that the foam insulation with zip ties and cables, and get it enclosed, or get some kind of chase built or something like that. Here's this chase or conduit stuff that they sell for the inside. They also sell it for the outside. It's important that you have a through wall penetration that, again, is watertight. Here's an interesting example of an entire building. They've chosen the back corner. You don't see this stuff, but it's kind of a, decide on an area to put these things, and we have a whole bank of them. They're all up on racks. They have nice clean conduit. All your electrical boxes all line up nicely. It's well done. It looks as clean as it can look, put it that way. But this is, so the building has gotten together and said, put your stuff over there. Don't you put yours here, you put yours here, and it starts looking like a bad case of the measles with all this all over your building. Here's an example of again, a ceiling mount system. You put them up in the ceiling, they kind of disappear. They're not a wall thing sitting on your wall. Couple of other things to think about besides that through hole penetration and this vibration we've talked about, the exterior clutter of the conduits and piping and things like that, or a mishmash of exterior clutter, a bad case of the measles. They have their unit here, their unit here, all over the place, and it really starts looking crummy. We got to understand where we see some of these fail is we got to understand the proper sizing. So each one of these units, they'll say will cool your unit to this degree if your unit is this big. So I've got a 900 square foot unit, a condo unit. My heat pump says it'll serve 800 square feet, or it'll say it brings it down to a 65-degree temperature. So in that example, I've got a bigger condo floor plan than the unit on the wall. And so we see this in, developer grade. They provide the cheapest, smallest unit they can provide and point to the AC and the mini split system as a benefit, but it won't cool the unit down enough, or it's just too small and it's working nonstop and it freezes up or it burns out, or it, so those kind of things. Pay attention to the sizing and make sure you have the right size. And then the next thing is the maintenance needs of both the exterior and interior. So the exterior units, they suck in dust. They're really pulling or pushing a lot of air, and so they have filters in them. They need to be cleaned. You need to maintain them. The through wall penetrations, there's always sealant involved, and that needs to be maintained and checked. But the interior units also have a drip pan, like an evaporative pan, that any kind of condensate is designed to go in there, hopefully evaporate out, but occasionally you have to clean that out and make sure that it's not running back into the wall or draining down the wall. And I'll show some of those photos a little bit later. So do yourself a favor when you're just kind of exploring this, just Google mini split, and you'll see some of these things. You'll see some videos you can watch, and you'll see some of the issues that we're concerned about. Here's a good example of new construction, or at least replacing the siding. So when we're doing exterior strip and reclads on existing buildings anyway, replacing the siding and fixing any water damage, maybe updating the windows and things like that, now is a great time to consider some mini split stuff, because we can put these through wall penetrations through the WRB, flash them correctly, bury the lines in the walls, make it as clean as possible, instead of bolting things onto the outside of the siding. Here's an example of that exterior conduit that's used, I guess, on the inside here. But these mini splits are great. They come, with little remote controls, and here's a 4-head unit, 2 big fans. So you can kind of see what we're talking about here. And it's not, you don't have to put away the portable air conditioner every time in the spring and fall. Now, because Google is Google, we can just type in bad mini split installs and see images of that. So here's the big picture. I've got 2 units, 2 exterior units. I've got pipe and hose going all the way, all over the building. The foam isn't wrapped. It's going to degrade there. Here's an example of, the leaking condensate lines caused a whole bunch of water damage. We've got some rickety electrical with some wire nuts not put in a box, and it's just be careful about that. Here's a good one. I didn't blow up the picture any, but I've got a whole bunch of excess hose. I've got weird conduit running around. Here's a classic. Oh, look at this downspout. It goes up to the 2nd floor. I'll just run my condensate line up the downspout. Give me a break. How's that supposed to? Now you're blocking the downspout. Another crummy example. I've jammed my lines through the bath fan duct into the unit, and this would look bad in a trailer park, much less your beautiful condominium complex. Just making sure that the installer is not just zip tying his extra excess line and leaving it there. He's actually shortening it. They give you a 20-foot line or whatever it is, and they've got flared fittings on them, so it's harder to trim the line and put a new flare fitting on it and connect them correctly. But this looks terrible. Here's another one. Just wow. Running, here's the conduit I was talking about. Here's no conduit. It's just a mess. So Google bad installs, and you'll see what we're talking about. Here's a frozen up. So this thing has been working too hard, and it actually froze the unit up, or is flooding the unit. Because it hasn't been drained. I saw another picture of what it looks like when they leak. I'll find it here. Here you go. So all the mold dripping down the unit. So what is happening? Anything level that you put on a wall is never perfectly level. It's always tipped just a hair. And so you can see this unit low side over here. Guess what? All the water is dripping out of this side. So it's making just a massive drainage and mold problem all over your walls. Here's kind of a good description. So we need 220 power, and so that's the other thing. I've got if I've got an old condo unit that has a small breaker box and there's no more breaker space left, how am I going to get this 220? So I need a double pole 30 or 40 amp, the size of a range or a dryer or something like that. So in some instances where we used to have electric dryers and we converted to gas. And so now we've got this space. That's a logical thing. Otherwise, now I need conduit running across. Now I need my, here's my condensate lines that are, again, exposed. And it just starts getting messy. So this guy's doing a clean job. Electrical box right there. There's electrical things right there. Nice concrete pad. So that shouldn't be under bad install. But you get the idea. Here's what we see a lot. Here's this exterior conduit that's clearly just caulked onto the siding. So since it's bevel siding, it's sticking out from the rest of the siding. So this isn't watertight at all. And it's just kind of a joke. And so the manufacturer says, don't worry, we sell exterior conduit. You can put it over there. Well, they didn't know you're putting it over bevel siding and it's kicking the thing out. And so these are the things that we're trying to work with the communities on, of just make sure you get it well installed. There's no excess hoses. It's watertight. I don't know what they're doing here. They're cutting through things, or they're just putting on a really ugly conduit. So do you want this all over your building? Do you want all these conduit lines, these hoses, these things mounted under a deck? So those are things that you as the board have to think about and kind of decide on, because the exterior wall is a common element, right? So when we punch through it, now we might create leaks. We're going to create vibrations. We're going to need to maintain things. We're going to need additional electrical. So those are the things to think about ahead of time and build a plan. Here's one more picture of such a common, bad, sloppy install. So we've got two sets of conduit lines drilled through a big hole. These are like 2-inch, 1.5-inch diameter things. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is like a 6-inch hole. And they over drilled it, jammed all the condensate lines in it, and spray foamed it. And so it's just, it's going to look terrible. But spray foam degrades with UV. These, the foam insulation on the lines degrades. And what a disaster. We see 90% of the installs that look like this because they don't sell one fitting to have all these lines going in. And so this is clearly just big old hole saw drilled right through everything and jammed it in there. And they take their rattle can of spray foam and go, it's good enough. Hate this. So hopefully this has been helpful, kind of explaining mini splits and air conditioning, and the boards we're working with tell the association, hey, if you want to install AC, it's up to you. You got to call somebody like J2 to give you a program to go through your siding. Maybe some boards ask us to produce a standard set of details so that everybody can use them, but and that's a good way to go. So if you want to do that, you got to follow these details. Your installer has to follow these details, and maybe even you have to have J2 come out and inspect to make sure they did follow those details and that it's watertight and your investment's protected. But it's also a little bit of aesthetic planning of, I don't want wires and hoses all over my building, and I want it to not look like an afterthought, a bunch of rickety, in 10 years, the exterior units are going to kind of look tattered and rusty. And so are we maintaining them? Are we repainting them? Are we, making sure conduit's the same color as the siding? Are we doing those things? So those are all the things to think about as we add exterior mounted, or as we add afterthought mini split systems or AC systems to keep us cool. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this was helpful.